So welcome everybody to the second session of the exchange day of the Francophone project for the strengthening of data practices. So I'd like in particular to welcome Emily Tarbuck, the PMER Systems Support Advisor, and Emma Stewart, the Business Analyst of WaterAid, who are here to share with us today their experience at the WaterAid level on data management and systems journey. So I'll hand over to them straight away, but just maybe to let you know that there'll be moments in the presentation where you can ask questions and where they'll have questions also for you to make sure it's as much of an exchange as possible. But also don't hesitate to post messages along the way in the chat. In particular in French, if you don't feel comfortable in English, and we can also help translate if some aspects are not clear. So Emma, welcome and thank you very much. Over to you.
Great. Hi, everyone. It's great to be with you all today. I'm Emily, and I'm the PMER Planning, Monitoring, Evaluation and Reporting System Support Advisor at WaterAid. A bit of a mouthful of a title, but essentially I work with country programs and regional teams to support their program data management and use of our program systems. I'm based in London in the UK, and I've been with WaterAid for 2 years.
Thanks, Emily. I'm Emma Stewart and a business analyst, as it says, so I'm working at the moment with our programs team to look at a new system that we're going to be introducing to combine 2 of our existing systems. So we'll kind of take you through that a little bit more in the presentation. I've been with WaterAid 6 years, and before this role I was in our program support unit, Emily's team, working with MWater and working with our country programs to kind of embed the use of MWater across the organisation. Thanks.
Okay. So a quick overview of what we're going to cover in today's session. So we'll get started with an introduction, what the objectives of today's session are, and a bit of background on WaterAid as an organisation. Then we'll look at PMER at WaterAid. So what are our processes for planning, monitoring, evaluation and reporting? What that looks like for us. And then we'll spend some time looking at the 3 program information systems we use and what our learnings are. Then we'll look forward at the future of our systems. And then we'll finish with some time for discussion, a chance for you to ask us any questions. And we also have a couple of questions for you all too that we'd love to get your insight on. So the objectives of this session today are to share with you really WaterAid's journey of data management and systems, to share with you the 3 systems we use and the benefits, challenges and learnings we've experienced. And based on that, what our plans and hopes for the future are for our data management and systems. And finally, like I said, we'd really love to have an open dialogue with you and hear from you as well. If anything particularly resonates with you or insights from your organisations that you'd like to share. And like I said, we have a couple of areas in particular that we'd like to discuss with you. So that's the plan for today and our objectives for this session. So let's get started with a bit of background on WaterAid as an organisation. So WaterAid is a WASH organisation that works to improve access to safe water, sanitation and hygiene. WaterAid works on direct service delivery, so installing and rehabilitating taps and toilets and hand washing facilities. But the organisation also works with a range of governments, policymakers, civil society and private sector partners as well on things like research, capacity development, policy analysis and campaigning to influence sustainable transformational change to ensure that everyone everywhere has access to safe water, sanitation and hygiene. And this slide shows our presence globally. So WaterAid is formed of 7 federation members, which we can see in that green box on the left. And WaterAid UK is one of those 7 Federation members. WaterAid works with 25 country programmes globally. 20 of those country programmes operate as part of WaterAid UK. So 20 country programmes in the East Africa, West Africa, Southern Africa and South Asia regions. And to give a sense of scale, globally WaterAid has around 1,000 staff members, with 300 of those based in the UK approximately. So WaterAid UK has something called the PMER core procedures, which sets out the minimum requirements for planning, monitoring, evaluation and reporting. So some organisations might call it MEAL or MEL or MNE, but WaterAid, we refer to that as PMER. And the core procedures don't describe all of the PMER processes or activities that a country programme might do, but it sets out the kind of minimum requirements of planning, monitoring, evaluation and reporting that all of the WaterAid UK country programmes do. And to support these core procedures, to support the country programmes to carry out those minimum requirements, WaterAid UK uses 3 systems that hold and manage our programme information. So Project Centre, an online management information system for our project and programme level work, MWater, a digital data collection tool to complete surveys and also to record an inventory of what country programmes do and where, and Power BI, a tool that we use to visualise data from these systems and other systems to explore and analyse this data in interactive dashboards. And it's these 3 systems that support WaterAid's programme planning, monitoring, evaluation and reporting. And this diagram illustrates those core procedures, those minimum requirements for planning, monitoring, evaluation and reporting. So the yellow cycle is the strategic cycle, which sets out how the country strategy will be implemented and progress reviewed. The middle blue cycle is the project cycle. And it's through those projects that strategies are implemented. So this blue project cycle sets out the processes for what is project identification, project planning, project monitoring and adaptation, and finally project assessment and transition. And the grey cycle is the annual cycle, which focuses on an annual slice of the country programme strategy. So outlining a plan for the coming year in the annual update, and then assessing progress of that plan in the 6-month review and annual review. And that's something that's done every year. And programme information is present throughout all of these stages, but there are these kind of information icons where programme information plays a particularly key role in the organisation within these cycles. So yeah, programme information is present throughout, but these indicate where it plays a particularly key role. So that was a bit of context about what the framework for planning, monitoring, evaluation and reporting in WaterAid is. So moving on now, this slide shows a timeline of WaterAid UK's journey of programme data management and using systems. So first of all, prior to 2015, there were no standardised systems. Country programmes had different processes of using various Excel spreadsheets and Word documents. But as the number of projects grew and as more and more projects were being implemented, it was difficult to keep track of this project information, and it was too difficult for management to keep track of what was happening, what the progress was. So yeah, pre-2015, we were in a situation of no standardized systems. There was a culture of using different Excel spreadsheets and Word documents that were inconsistent and difficult to keep track of. So moving to the second stage of the journey, there was an acknowledgement that with a growing number of projects, it needed to be systematized. So Project Centre and MWater systems were rolled out across WaterAid's UK country programmes. And in this stage 2, after the system rollout was completed, systems were being used by all 20 WaterAid's UK country programmes. They were inputting data in a standardised way, which meant staff knew where to find programme and project information. And this data was being used for reporting, for example, in annual reporting as part of the annual cycle that we looked at in the previous slide. And then if we look at the third stage from 2020 onwards, so stage 3, where we're currently at, we're moving towards a greater accessibility of data in the system. So using Power BI to create dashboards that are accessible to everyone to view programme information, as well as evolving from just using our systems for data input and for reporting, but also for using this data for management decisions, for management decision making. So for staff to be viewing this data and using it to inform their discussions and their decisions for their programmes. And also planning for a new integrated funding and programme management system, which Emma is going to talk more about later. And this journey is, as you can see, very much still ongoing. We're still on this journey, but this is an overview of kind of where we have come from in terms of programme data management and systems and where we're currently at. So let's get started on looking at our 3 systems and our learning. So I'll give a bit of background about what the system is, how we use it, and I'll share my screen as well so you can actually have a bit of a look. Sometimes I find that easier to get more of a sense of something, actually seeing the system rather than just through screenshots. And then Emma will share our learnings for each of the systems. So first of all, Project Centre. Project Centre is an online management information system provided by a company called Nudia. And it's a web-based software platform that supports WaterAid's planning, monitoring, evaluation and reporting. And the main purpose of the system is to support programme and project managers to plan, monitor and manage their project in a standardised way, and for management to be able to oversee progress and risks. So let's take a look at Project Centre. So this is Project Centre. This is the homepage where we can see the different levels in the organisation. So the 4 regions: East Africa, South Asia, Southern Africa, West Africa. We can see the country programmes within those regions, and underneath those, the programmes and the projects that are implemented. And each of these levels has its own record with relevant information stored there, but let's have a look at an example of a project today. So this is where project teams store and update key information about their projects. So here we can access information about a project such as the project summary, what the project's focusing on, the time frame of the project, the categories, so what the kind of key areas and approaches of the project are. And the project's results framework is stored on Project Centre as well. So we can take a quick look at that. So the results framework would be created at the start of the project, indicators would be added, and then results updated over the course of the project. So we can take a quick look at an example of the indicators. My internet's a bit slow today, but yeah, this is kind of an example of an indicator on the project. And project center is where global user numbers are recorded. So the number of people reached with water in schools, for example, or the number of people reached with sanitation in public facilities. Those global user numbers are recorded here. And then there's also a quarterly traffic light progress rating. So a RAG, red, amber, green rating given each quarter by the project team to capture progress. And we can see that the history of those ratings here and the comment. So yeah. A rating given each quarter by the project team, a comment summarising key progress, updates, challenges, essentially a brief update about how the project is going. And also on a project record, project teams can store their project risk management plan and store key documents associated with the project as well. So we can see that here. So that's kind of a quick look at a project record on Project Center, what kind of information it contains. Let's take a very quick look at the report function. So there's an inbuilt report functionality as well, and an example of the report, a report that that's inbuilt is the program and project progress report. So I can select a country, choose my format and download it. And I ran this earlier just to give an example, just to give you a sense of initially the kind of reporting that we could generate with the system. So that's an example of one of the kind of inbuilt reports, where we can see for the country program that's selected, all of the program and project RAG ratings as well, to give a sense of the kind of inbuilt reporting. So that's a brief look at Project Center. I won't go into too much detail, but I hope that's given an idea of what the system is, what kind of program information is managed there. And I'll hand over to Emma to share a few of our learnings.
Thanks, Emily. Yes, so after each of the systems, we thought it might be helpful to reflect a little on the 6 key stakes that were identified in CartONG's recent report. So in terms of the clear leadership and accountability and solid and coherent strategies with Project Center and the kind of way it was rolled out, we found that was really helpful to be really well aligned with the processes. So as Emily said, we did a lot of work to review and kind of streamline our planning, monitoring, evaluation and reporting processes. And Project Center was introduced alongside those as the way of supporting the processes on a system. So that kind of doing those together and in conjunction and kind of supporting each other really helped in terms of rollout, training and buy-in. And then that has enabled us, as you've seen, to have that systematic view of all our projects and programs. And that's something that previously we would have maybe once a year when we did the annual reporting and got Excel reports from all our country teams. But having that view of everything at any point in time has been really beneficial, and obviously increases accountability to donors and communities that we're working with as well, to know what's going on where, and to be able to see updates on how the projects are going. Some of our learnings around the info obesity to info sobriety area, I think one thing we were really focused on when we were rolling out the system was to really not be too ambitious. So it's a huge step to go from Excel to a systematized way of capturing and storing information. And so we really wanted to make sure we just started with the basics. things like the RAG rating, the kind of project update that you saw for each project was a huge step to have a kind of quarterly check-in with each project. So just the kind of the rating and then a comment has been really helpful in assessing progress and the kind of latest updates for projects. And so when we were introducing the system, we really had a focus on keeping anything that was mandatory on the system to an absolute minimum. We didn't want there to be too many kind of requirements or anything on the system, but just keeping it to the core data that we were looking at kind of consistently across our country teams. But then obviously it has the ability for people to use it in more advanced ways if they wanted to. I guess one downside of this is then that because those mandatory fields, mandatory tasks were things that we needed to consolidate globally, it has led to a bit of a perception that the system itself is just for the UK reporting aspects. We'll come on to that in a bit, because at the moment donor reporting often happens offline, not on the system, and so that's one thing we'd love to address with the new system to reduce any duplication of effort. So it's that balance, I guess, of not wanting to over mandate what has to be on the system, but then also trying to not have the perception that it is just for UK reporting and that the system is actually useful for project management and program management as well. And then lastly, in terms of data literacy, we have an indicator library on Project Centre, which means that people can choose the relevant indicators for their project and enter those into the results framework, and they're kind of already set up on the system and ready to be used. So that has helped with consistency, and it means that for some of our standard indicators, we can roll them up and aggregate them very easily across all the projects where they're entered. However, the library grew hugely. You see here over 500 indicators because every project team wanted their own indicators. So I think that is something we're going to review with the new system and try and have some more consistency across thematic areas. Yeah, I'll hand back over to Emily now for the Analyst.
Great, thank you, Emma. So yeah, moving to our second system, which is MWater. So MWater is a digital data collection and analysis tool that we use in WaterAid. And it's a tool that enables you to create surveys and monitor and verify survey responses, and then visualize, analyze and share this data. And we use MWater in a number of ways in WaterAid. So we use it to record an inventory of what we do. So a record of physical infrastructure, so things like water points installed, hand washing facilities rehabilitated, as well as places, so schools worked in, healthcare facilities worked in, so where those are geographically and key details about them. We use it to capture data about water quality through water quality surveys. So is the water safe to drink? And MWater is also used for sustainability monitoring. So it's used in PIMS, the post-implementation monitoring survey, which was one of those stages in the strategic cycle, so that yellow cycle, which is a large-scale survey conducted by country programmes, taking a sample of projects from the past 10 years to give us an understanding of the sustainability of our approach. And MWater is also used by country programmes for baseline and endline and other surveys, as well as district monitoring, so collecting water service level data. MWater is free, but WaterAid has invested in certain functionality developments. So it's a tool that responds to our needs and for the sector, but this functionality is open to all. And it can be used for any survey, not just for WASH. So there's Solstice, which is a sector neutral version with all of the same functionality. So yeah, this screenshot on the slide is an example of a map of Malawi on MWater. We can see the inventory, so where the water points are, where the health facilities are, etc. and you can click kind of on those icons and see more information, photos, etc. So we can have a quick look now at what that looks like. So yeah, this is kind of the inventory for the financial year. And I can see that, for example, this water point, kind of where it's located, the exact GPS coordinates, a photo of that water point here. I can also see what it's linked to. So I can see that it's part of a wider water system. I can see the community that it's within, and the health facility that it's located in, as well as other key information about that water point. And I've opened up the healthcare facility as well, that it's linked to. So I can see information about it, the location, a photograph of that healthcare facility that the water point's located in. Key information about it, as well as surveys that are linked to, that are related to that healthcare facility that can then be kind of attached or linked. So yeah, that's kind of a brief look at some inventory records. Yeah, and another thing that I'd like to just show briefly on MWater is an example of kind of standardized surveys as well. So it's a survey form builder where there are a set of kind of standardized surveys that people can use or modify and adapt to their own context. So a brief example is this water quality survey, which is a standardized survey that all country programs use, as well as other types of surveys. So this is an example of an accessibility audit for a hand washing facility. So these are kind of inbuilt, ready to deploy. So yeah, just to kind of give you an example of what these standardized surveys look like. And I will hand over to Emma for some reflections on MWater.
Thanks, Emily. Yes, as Emily said, we started using MWater in about 2015, so about 7 years now, and we really made the decision to choose one tool to invest in and to support and to provide guidance and training on across the organisation for our data, mobile data collection tools. I know there's an awful lot of tools out there, and we really decided it'd be better to choose one that we could then support well across the organisation. And I suppose because we've invested in it and because that functionality is then available for any user of MWater to use, it's also seen as kind of part of our programmatic work. We've worked with a number of local and national governments, kind of demonstrating the functionality of MWater and how kind of collecting that sort of data can be really useful in terms of planning and budgeting and management of WASH within their kind of region or country. It's a really user-friendly tool. We've seen that lots of our country teams have used it for all sorts of things that we wouldn't have even thought of. So it was a very flexible tool initially. Particularly, we kind of introduced it primarily for our sustainability surveys, but then it can be used for any sort of survey, and that flexibility in it really encouraged the uptake across our country teams. In terms of data management and kind of collecting lots of data, I suppose it's really helped us in terms of our accountability. I'll show you in a second just an example of kind of our inventory data before and after using MWater. So that visibility of the communities and water points that we've supported is is really great to kind of be able to have those images, and also the I guess the proof of kind of where money's being spent and where we're working. It's brilliant on MWater to be able to have kind of standardized surveys, as Emily has shown, but then you can also have standardized sections, so an introduction and questions around informed consent. So we've developed those kind of centrally, and they're available for people to use in any survey. So to try and ensure we are gathering informed consent and being responsible in the way that we collect data. That's helped there. With the introduction of GDPR a few years ago, we did a large exercise looking at all the data and images that we've collected on MWater. I suppose one challenge is that because anyone can create a survey and ask any question they want to, it's hard to know exactly kind of what data we are collecting and storing. So there's been a lot of training to ensure that people know kind of what is good practice, not asking for data unnecessarily, and then reviewing data when the data is being used, I guess, for its purpose. So in a household survey, we would often ask for somebody's name and phone number, just in case we needed to follow up with any of the responses. But then encouraging people at the end of the survey period to delete that question, so to remove all that data completely, to make sure we're not storing personal information unnecessarily. I guess one challenge, as I've kind of alluded to already, is that there is a lot of data that's collected on MWater. So we've got lots of surveys. And so there is that challenge, I guess, to us, is whether we use all the data that we collect. I think it's really important to only ask questions if you're going to use them and respond to them. So I think that is one challenge we would have there. And then that kind of tension, I guess, between centralised support and local autonomy, because it's such a flexible tool, and we've encouraged everyone to use it for what they would like to. I guess it's then quite hard if there's only, say, one or two people centrally to provide the support and all the country teams, and to make sure all the kind of responsible data management processes are being followed. In terms of data literacy, while it was very flexible initially, we've seen the need to have some standardisation. So in terms of water quality monitoring surveys, and also our inventory data. So we're starting to kind of have some more standardised uses of the platform to ensure that we're having consistent data and good quality data that's collected. There's an awful lot of resources available around using MWater, but also designing surveys and questions. So we've done a lot of training, which is ongoing on the use of MWater and data collection. I think when we thought through all the skills needed to do a good survey, it's so vast in terms of developing good questions, managing data collection, analysing, knowing how to build specific charts on MWater. So there's a lot of areas that need ongoing support. And I guess inevitably there's challenges there with the turnover in our country teams and partner organisations. So that's something that is ongoing. And brilliant, thanks Emily. Now I'm back over to you. Oh, sorry, yeah, this is just a kind of comparison. So I guess we used to get inventory data in Excel sheets at the top left, so thousands and thousands of rows that I'd have to consolidate, and it's really painful each year to try and get the whole view of where we were working. And sometimes then when you would map those coordinates, you see on the right hand side, they would not be accurate and be in kind of locations where we don't work. So then with the introduction of MWater, the bottom left, this area in Madagascar, you see the different water points that were supported a couple of years ago. And as Emily's already shown, when you click on a site, a water point, you will see an image of that water point and some of the core information about it. So just the kind of huge improvements that MWater has enabled us to have in terms of accountability and visibility, I guess, of what we're doing and where. Thanks, Emily.
Okay, great. So moving on to Power BI. Some of you may well be familiar with with Power BI as a tool, but in case some of you aren't, Power BI is a data visualization tool that allows you to build and use interactive, user-friendly dashboards. So we don't enter data directly on Power BI, but instead Power BI takes data from other existing systems and displays that in interactive dashboards. And a number of these dashboards have been developed to visualize and analyze data from WaterAid systems, for example, data from projects entering MWater, as well as other systems. So the screenshot on the right is an example of one of the dashboards that we use. And a bit of background. So if we look at this diagram on the slide, so at the top, kind of different systems used in WaterAid. And over the past few years, a number of different systems have been introduced to support different business processes, including projects enter and MWater, as well as RIS, the restricted income system, and our two finance systems, FinStream and Gas, and People Place, our HR system. And each system has been effective to an extent in supporting specific business processes. But there's often been a lack of visibility of the information within these systems, which can lead to teams working in silos. So people not having direct access to the system or access to the data they need, often requesting data manually, receiving via spreadsheets, confusion between what is the correct and up-to-date information. And this fundamentally stops people from being able to see the full picture. But Power BI enables us to bring key information from across these systems. So data from WaterAid systems is pulled regularly into a central data warehouse, and the data in the Power BI visualizations are taken from the data warehouse. And then the relevant information from across these systems can be brought together to enable people to see it all in one place, to make it visible to decision makers, to fundamentally support better informed decision making. And our use of Power BI is continually evolving. So it started mostly to support internal reporting. So annual reporting, that's the kind of example, the screenshot on the left of our annual report data dashboard. So that was designed to kind of bring together the numbers required for annual reporting, such as those user numbers I mentioned before. So how many people we reached in the year, and the inventory, so that we looked at in MWater, so how many water points were installed, how many, as well as things like how many partners we worked with, how many projects were implemented. So that was kind of an example of our early use of Power BI, which we still do, but we're also moving towards using Power BI for decision making. So the example on the right is the country management dashboard, which was launched in October 2020 and brings together program, finance, funding and people data from different systems in one place. So this is kind of the first time that it was possible to bring data from those different areas, from those different systems together. And it ensures that key information from those different systems is visible to teams and decision makers and country programs in one easily accessible place. So it's kind of not for reporting, but instead for local decision making, which came from input and feedback from country program colleagues on the need to shift the focus away from having these systems for compliance and reporting and towards having this information for local decision making. And this evolution is very much kind of in progress and something we're still working on. But I'll pause here and hand over to Emma to share some of our Power BI reflections.
Thanks, Emily. Yeah, so one of the real successes, I think, of Power BI is making our data that's stored in multiple systems a lot more visible and accessible. Particularly increasingly for our management. So as Emily said, around the country management dashboard, we spent a lot of time kind kind of exploring what would be helpful for managers to see, and bringing that all together has been really valuable, I think, in having all the data in one place. And as we said, we're increasingly moving from just making information available to using that data to inform decision making. So it's great to see country teams using the management dashboard in their regular meetings. I think another real benefit of Power BI is it's helped us to overcome challenges of system integration. So I saw a question actually in the chat window about what financial data is on Project Center. Initially, we did have an integration between our finance and Project Center system, but that was just a bit tricky for lots of reasons, and the information that was shown wasn't accurate and didn't tie back to our finance systems. So rather now we put both of those data feeds into Power BI, and we can see the information side by side in one place, which has been really beneficial. However, as we said already, we've got a lot of different systems at WaterAid, and so when we introduced Power BI, it was kind of seen as another system, and so it took a while to kind of share with people that it wasn't a different system, it was just a view to all the data from our various systems, and so it's not something else that needed to be updated, but more it was just something to be used to see the information that was already available elsewhere. I think it's helped us in terms of data literacy, in terms of having narrative and help text next to the data to kind of explain what it's showing, and to help people to kind of interpret what the information is telling them. It's also got the great ability to build KPIs, key performance indicators, based on system data. So we've developed one called Projects That Need Attention, and this looks at data from a variety of systems, so whether there's overspend or underspend on the project, what the latest kind of RAG rating is, and some other factors. And if any of those are kind of above the threshold, it will flag that project as something that needs to be looked into a bit. So being able to kind of build some more kind of sophisticated analysis based on data from across our systems has been a benefit as well. And as I've touched on, that when you introduce a new system, there is kind of varied uptake, and so some country teams are still a bit hesitant to use it. So we're looking to address that through kind of peer-to-peer support and role modelling, so that people can see the benefits. Brilliant. I think we've got a pause now, do we, Emily, for some questions? Oh no, sorry.
Yeah, that's okay. I'll just speak very briefly on support structures, and I noticed a couple of questions in the chat just then about that, and then we'll pause for questions and comments. So in terms of support structures for these systems, so we have a super user structure. So there's a super user based in each country, usually the same person across the three systems, but sometimes there'll be more than one super user if it's a big country program, as well as a super user at the regional level who supports the country colleagues in their region. And there are two full-time system managers whose full-time job it is to support the use of these systems, to manage updates, to get feedback. So I'm one of those people, and the other is my colleague who's based in Pakistan. So what works well about the super user structure? This decentralized approach means there is geographical representation and support to users. So in a country, multiple people will be using MWater, Project Center, and Power BI, and they will have a super user who can give them training, who can support them with user queries, and advise them on how these systems could support their work in a contextualized way, because that super user knows the context best in their country. In terms of managing users, this is also really efficient because the super user knows if there's a new starter who needs an induction, that they know how program data and systems can support that person's work rather than it being done centrally. But these super users often have this as one part of their roles. They're often very busy supporting multiple projects, conducting field work, and the super user role means they're balancing a lot of things. This might be something you're familiar with in your organizations. We have kind of role descriptions of what it means to be a super user, what that entails, what super users are responsible for, which helps people be on the same page of what's expected. But it is an ongoing challenge of not wanting to overburden very busy colleagues who have competing priorities. And secondly, we have regular webinars and sharing sessions. So a monthly MWater sharing session, a quarterly project centre webinar. These regular touch points mean that the super user network can stay in touch about how things are going in their countries, discuss new features, hear about system updates, or share a case study of, say, a recent data collection training, for example. One challenge is that sometimes it can be tricky to get kind of real honest experiences. So how are things really going? If something didn't go well, why not? It's great to share positive things, what went well, what's working, what you like about a new dashboard or feature, but what about what didn't go so well? We can learn a lot from sharing what's gone wrong, what's not going so well, but psychologically there's a culture of not sharing what didn't go so well. And finally, training. Many of you may have experienced the same with challenges and huge learnings from the transition to virtual training. A lot of this was done in person before the pandemic, and a big learning curve has been how to train virtually and how to do that well. This meant a lot of adapting resources, being more creative, really taking stock after a training of what worked and what didn't work. So things that were challenging, like not being able to build a rapport with the group, hesitancy for people to ask questions online, not knowing if people were really following the content or needed a bit of extra support. And there was a previous culture of lots of travel for a training, but the likelihood that even with the kind of return to the office, there will be a change in this international travel culture, and also with hybrid working remaining, so people being based anywhere in the world, working remotely and occasionally traveling, but virtual trainings seem like they'll continue to be a reality going forward. But this has meant kind of a move towards co-facilitation. So something that's done a lot more often now is to co-facilitate with a colleague in that location. So if a training is happening in a country, can a super user who is based there be in that room leading the training, going around to people's laptops, doing all of those things to get engagement and properly support with backup from someone virtually. And if it's all virtual, building in time for icebreakers, breaks, interactive quizzes to keep people engaged. So not making assumptions, but being proactive and planning for this ahead of time. And finally, the quarterly induction. So this is a newer initiative. So inductions are given by super users in country programs. But if someone needs a refresher, or if they don't have a super user in place at that point, there's a quarterly regular opportunity to learn the fundamentals of the systems. So kind of like a quarterly opportunity to drop in. So that really summarizes for us what these support structures look like, and some things that have gone well and some challenges and learnings too. So we've been talking for a little while, so we'll pause now before Emma takes us through the future of the systems. So we'll take a few minutes for any kind of immediate questions or clarifications.
Do you want to take a couple of minutes to start off with all the questions in the chat?
Yes, sure. I'll just go to the top. I
saw there was one question initially around what a federation number is. So I can answer that one briefly. It's just, I guess it's WaterAid is made up of a number of different organisations that kind of all fall under WaterAid as the umbrella. And the federation members are kind of independent organisations that often manage our country teams. So we've got WaterAid America, WaterAid UK, WaterAid Australia, who all have their own country programmes that they manage, but then they often do fundraising and advocacy work as well within those. Yeah.
And there's a question on the process to standardise. What was that process to standardise the data sets that needed to be collected by each project? And also a question about financial data. So I suppose the core procedures set out what data needs to be collected, what data needs to be reported on, how the system should be used, so that that core procedures is kind of a document, and that sets out all of those stages in that in those cycles we looked at, and then for each of those stages, what data needs to be collected and reported on. And it might well be that countries collect other data and report on other data to donors, or that's specific to their project. But those kind of like minimum requirements are all outlined in this kind of one document, which I think was last reviewed a couple of years ago. We're planning a kind of light touch review now, just to kind of check in, is it still relevant to collect this data? Is it actually being used? Are there any modifications that need to be made? And in terms of financial data, yeah, Emma kind of touched on that about there used to be an integration, but now if people want to access financial information about their projects, we point them into the direction of the country management dashboard, which presents that in a really accessible information to everyone. Did you want to add anything, Emma, about that?
No, I think that's great, thank you.
Great. There was a question from Catherine about the project cycle management processes connected to Project Centre. Exactly like you say, Catherine, yes, there's that kind of core procedures document is kind of contains comprehensive guidelines about kind of, yeah, for each process, each step, what that means for the systems. And that's kind of, yeah, outlined in that core procedures document.
I can answer a couple on MWater.
Yeah, great.
So I've just answered actually Antoine's questions in the chat window as well, but please do come back if you have any further questions on those. I see a question, is data collection in MWater done on mobile by field teams? Yes, yeah, we use mobile, but also tablets, and sometimes information is also collected on paper and then transferred into MWater if that's most appropriate in the situation. So that can be both our own colleagues in country programs, but also we work a lot with partners and then sometimes external enumerators as well for larger data collection. But some country teams have trained all our partner staff on how to use MWater, so that kind of information can just be entered as and when people are in communities. Another one around MWater is whether other organisations are using it. Yes, there are a number of other organisations. I forget how many at the moment, but Safe Water Network in Ghana is another quite large user of the platform, and there's many others, both from kind of large international NGOs to kind of smaller partner organisations as well.
And maybe just a follow-up question related to that. Well, it's a question I often we've often discussed before, Emma. But one of the issues we've always seen with MWater is that it was not sort of part of the XLS forms world. It's pretty widespread in the sector. And so, how do you manage like data interoperability with other organisations, as MWater isn't based on that world?
I'm not so used to using MWater day to day now, but I know we can download the information into Excel, and I think there is, we have in the past shared data with the Humanitarian data exchange, which is kind of core water point data. But yes, you're right in that it's a different platform, I guess, to say ODK and other tools like that. Emily, I'm not sure if there's been any further work on sharing data recently.
Yeah, not recently, but yeah, it's an interesting point. And I think Emma's answered a few of the questions in the chat, so maybe just the final one from Rick about sharing reports with local partners. And there was a couple above about, yeah, Power BI as well. So for Power BI, it's mostly kind of internal, so everyone in WaterAid has access. There's no licenses, which is brilliant. Just kind of everyone can have access to that information. There have been a couple of times when the dashboard a few of the dashboards have been shared kind of externally, and there's kind of a process we go through in terms of kind of getting approval to share from the data owners. Kind of, yeah, a few compliance steps, but mostly the Power BI reports are shared internally. And kind of if there's any information on there or from the source systems project center or MWater, then that would kind of depend on the country. They might export into Excel to kind of share or discuss with a partner. But mostly, yeah, these are kind of internal systems for WaterAid staff, with the exception of MWater, where kind of partners often collect data. I don't know if Emily wanted to speak on that.
No, nothing more to add at this point. I see there's a question, are there reports from Project Centre fed by MWater's data? That's one thing we'll touch on now with the new system and the vision for that. Currently, there is no kind of connection between MWater and Project Centre, but often the data that is in Project Centre has been collected on MWater, but there's the manual step of entering it between the two systems.
Yeah, should we? Oh, sorry. You go.
I was just going to ask a last question on sort of the past before you go to the future. Did you ever have time to sort of analyze the cost it represented to both deploy all these tools and all these new approaches that go with it? Or is this something you're considering on doing?
The cost?
Yeah, for the organization.
Yeah, that's interesting. I imagine we did for the PMER project, so when we rolled out all the processes and Project Centre, but it's not something we've looked into a lot. Yeah, kind of as a wider organisation.
Okay.
Yeah, something to think through. Great. Should we move on to kind of what's coming up? What's the future? So I guess as we've touched on already, there are quite a few systems that we're using across WaterAid: finance, funding, project management, data collection. And so we've done a lot of user consultation in the past few months, looking at what are the challenges, what's kind of holding people back currently. One of the key things that comes out is the duplication of data and effort between systems, having to use multiple systems in their day-to-day work. And that does lead to project managers who often have to pull all that information together to get the overall picture. It's a bit of a struggle for them. And also, as we've touched on, donor reporting is done offline, often not on our kind of core systems. So these are three of the key challenges that we're hoping to address with our current project that we're working on. Emily, would you mind moving to the next slide, please? Brilliant, thanks. So just at a high level, what we're planning to do is combine our project management and funding, restricted funding system into one overall IPD system, so for our international programs department. And this will help us to kind of further align processes which are aligned on paper but not within systems. Having two systems means there's often a disconnect between the data and the kind of process flow. And And by having these two in one place, hopefully it will really support project managers to have everything they need, all the data in one place, trying then to integrate those systems with MWater, with the finance system, to have it all visible in one place. You enter information once and it's available where it needs to be. And then also trying to think through what are the kind of more project management features that we could have on the system. We've seen that Project Center has been customized for WaterAid, but it's not, configured for WaterAid, but it's not so customizable. So hopefully with a new system where we can have more workflows and task management, that will really help people to be able to use it in their day-to-day work rather than just say for reporting and entering information. If we go on to the next one, brilliant. So just some kind of final reflections on the future system and how we're looking at each of the stakes. I guess it's great that we've got the Program Operations Director as the sponsor of the project. So there's real leadership and kind of buy-in behind it from the most senior of management. And myself and my colleague have been seconded into the programs team from IT for this project. So there's a real core team of us now working full-time on the project. In terms of bringing the two systems together, we'll be aligning our processes in a systematized way. So that will really help, hopefully, our kind of processes to be aligned and kind of workflows to be a lot smoother rather than jumping between different systems. And in doing that, we'll remove duplication of effort because there's just a one system rather than multiple places that people will be entering data. And we will continue to have kind of any mandatory requirements on the system to be a minimum, not kind of overburdening people with requirements of what data is needed. And obviously when you're introducing a new system, you've got the ability to kind of be GDPR compliant from the outset and set relevant access and permission controls to ensure that data is well managed and only shared with those who need to see it. And then finally, we're hoping that the new system will be a lot more user-friendly. It's a key selection factor in our kind of tender process to make sure that it's easy and straightforward for people to use and to pick up, and hopefully having integration with our other key systems and data sources, as we've said, will help people to really see the benefits of having everything in one place and not having to go between various places for what they need. Brilliant. So we did have another pause for any further questions. I see a question. Do you still have to comply with GDPR after Brexit? Not 100% sure, but we are. we did take GDPR quite seriously, so I know I think it only applies to, say, EU citizens, or that was my understanding, but we made sure that all our data on MWater from all our country teams was compliant, so kind of went beyond maybe what the strictest requirements said, because we didn't feel it was fair to treat people differently. But yes, we are still complying with GDPR around that.
Maybe one question that also goes back to the discussions during the Oxfam intervention around the question of like standardization. I've always seen like WaterAid as it's a very specialized organization, as it being hopefully a bit easier to set up at least minimum indicators that everybody needs to follow, etc. And so when you were talking about like 500 different indicators in your indicator database, etc., I'm just wondering, what it can be like for other organizations that are not just focused on WASH. But I don't know if you want to share some thoughts around that and how you tackle this. I mean, you were mentioning that there were a few things you were also opening up at the beginning so that people really get engaged in the tool and are thinking of making it maybe a bit more restricted in the future. But yeah, if you want to react a bit, and what's the way forward that you're planning in concrete steps?
Yeah, I think that's always a challenge with with indicators, because while yes, we do have, you know, one kind of focus on WASH and specialism, I guess there's still varying areas. So we have you know, WASH in health, WASH in schools, WASH in different areas, and so that's kind of what led to that explosion, I guess, of indicators. But we are doing more work now on creating thematic results frameworks, so kind of best practice indicators for different areas, and so hopefully that will go some way to reducing those kind of core indicators. But it's always that balance, I guess, of not being overly prescriptive, but also providing helpful tools. You know, one dream could be you can set up indicators on MWater with the questions and with the calculations, so that when you ask questions in a community, it feeds into the indicator value, and then we could integrate that with the new system and have the information flowing kind of seamlessly. But I think the challenges between standardization and kind of allowing for flexibility and contextualization is something we'll always just have to think through. Emily, I don't know if you had anything further to add on that.
Yeah, I think so, and it kind of relates to Rick's last question as well. I think, yeah, we're definitely of the position that having kind of standardized indicators can be really helpful to people. They're kind of a really practical way that can save people time. If they want to aggregate, having a standardized indicator can enable that. In terms of adding a new standardized indicator, kind of that's something that the super users or kind of the system managers would do, but anyone can add their own kind of ad hoc indicator at any time. And it's, yes, searching that list of indicators. You can do that directly in Project Center. So if you're creating your results framework, you can kind of browse all of the ready-made indicators there. But we also have a Power BI dashboard as well that we made, an indicator library, which just made it a bit kind of a bit more of a user-friendly way to search and filter and kind of find ready-made indicators as kind of a supplementary tool to browse that library.
Oh, I'd never heard of that, a dashboard of indicator lists.
Yeah, and it might be something with the new system that they have an inbuilt indicator library that's really user-friendly. You can filter and search. It was just, yeah, with the limitation of Project Center having a indicator library and a dashboard, helped fill that gap.
Great. I see, yeah, Catherine's put indicator list linked to theories of change. Exactly. I think that's what we're hoping for with these new kind of thematic theories of change results frameworks, having more kind of ready to go indicators depending on what your project's focusing on. I'm conscious of time. We did have a couple of questions for everyone on the call. I'm not sure if we flick to those quickly. I think we do only have a matter of minutes, maybe, is that right? So we probably won't have very long with these.
But we can take 5 minutes or so, no problem.
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess the first one, we touched on it a bit, but we wondered if you have any experience or tips about kind of the evolution or moving away from data for reporting and towards utilization of that data for decision making. That's something that's kind of still ongoing for us. So we wondered if you had any kind of experiences of that or tips from your organization.
Don't hesitate to unmute for anyone who wants to intervene. It was also a similar question that we had during a the Oxfam intervention, or at least Rick was trying to give a few tips about how to do that. I remember some aspects being really around making building some of the dashboards really in country to make sure that users of the dashboards are really there and get involved in the creation of the tools. But I don't know if Rick, you want to read to jump in, or if anybody else wants to give some feedback. Oh, I think this is the burning question for everybody, to be honest.
Yeah, maybe I do have a feedback on this one, but it's in relationship with what you were saying. Actually, at HI, so we've been building dashboards just like the ones that you were showing. And one of the things we did was really to involve the end users of the dashboard in creation and really to base the dashboard on their job description. So we started from their job description to see what were the key elements of the job descriptions and what kind of decision they would have to make in their day-to-day job. And then we tried to build a dashboard really on this. So I'm not saying it's perfect, but it helped to make sure that they use the dashboard.
Great, thanks for sharing. Yeah, that's interesting to go, to the job description. It's a great idea.
Maybe I can go with one recommendation from Première Urgence Internationale and Antoine, the lead advisor. What we used to do to answer maybe the question one is we have one practice that might be helpful, and I'm sure you experience it already, but it's we have a database with all our recommendations that we try to share on a monthly basis, just to involve, senior managers and general managers at mission level to have somehow a supervision on this database, and then to push a little bit like the different project manager at base level, for example. I think this, for example, helps to follow up on recommendation and to push for decision making instead of just simply the reporting. So yes, it's one good practice from our side, and also to use this database during a strategic exercise as well. I think it might be interesting.
Great, thanks for sharing. Again, maybe this is something we could continue discussing after this. Emma, did you want to put a question too?
Yeah, thanks. So I guess just again, it would be lovely to hear any kind of tips or advice people have for introducing a new system. If anyone's gone through this process recently and has anything they'd like to share, I guess we're very much at the start of this process and project, and so anything we can learn from others about introducing a new system would be brilliant.
I would love to know how many people in the room have an integrated funding and program system. I think a lot of people will be waiting to hear from your feedback in a few months or in a year or two. But yeah, does anybody want to jump in?
Maybe I can share one of the challenges we're having in TDH currently. Is that actually our information systems think in terms of grants and funding sources, while we're trying our project managers to think in terms of project. And this is the major challenge we're now facing to work on, on making these systems speak to each other. It seems really basic, but it's an amazing problem we have. I mean, having everyone agree on which funding source or which part of which funding or at which stage or which project is a funding coming in, and how do you make them correspond to a stabilized project list, which is also updated on a continuous basis. So just to share this this challenge we're currently facing.
Thank you. Yeah, that really resonates. I think that connection between projects and funding should be easy, but it isn't as straightforward as we would think or hope. So yeah, we've got a paper at the moment that's getting feedback around that relationship and trying to clarify that, because until now it's been okay because they've been in separate systems, but bringing them together in a system and needing to have those connections really kind of embedded into the system is going to need it to be clarified. And there's different views. Some people say it's quite straightforward, but then there are always the exceptions. It's how far do you go to make sure the exceptions are catered for. But yeah, it's a tricky one. Thanks.
Does anybody else want to jump in for our last recommendation? Okay, well, I would just like to thank you so much, Emily and Emma, for this really interesting presentation. It'll be followed by another couple of presentations over the year with other feedback, so I'm sure similar questions will also emerge. And so don't hesitate, of course, the two of you, if you want to jump in like Rick did this time, as it's always interesting to have a bit of a follow-up. We'll close this session now in a couple of minutes, and for anybody who wants to attend the third session, so the workshop on how to bring information management or how to make place for information management in the field, we'll actually be using a similar method to what Florian was saying there earlier around looking at what a sort of user profile is and what their constraints are and what they need on a day-to-day basis to be able to better function and better connect with information management, to make it easier for information management to find its full space and place in the field. So don't hesitate for all those who speak French to jump in 10 minutes to that further presentation. And again, thank you, Emma and Emily. We'll be sharing the recording as usual. And if Emma and Emily are okay, we'll also share the presentation with all the participants. And if there's any follow-up questions, Emma, Emily, do you agree that your emails also be shared so that participants can connect back with you?
Yeah, absolutely. That would be great to continue the conversation.
Okay, well, lovely. Thanks a million again. I'm sure everybody was thrilled to hear you, and we'll speak soon.
Yeah, thank you everyone for your time. It was great to speak with you today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.